for some Bengals news. At the Growler, we got you. Hot takes, interviews from your host, Paul Daniel Jr.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of the Growler. Paul Daniel Jr. here with you, along with our good friend Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, what's going on?
Paul, do you plan to make any comments on the futures of Jay and myself and, Mark Shalafu and the whole Growler podcast team? What are your thoughts? Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts, and I'm optimistic is what I want to say, that we can keep this thing rolling and we can keep everything going and make everybody happy. But to be honest, I'm just looking for engagement from their camps. I need that engagement to know, look, it's not easy to pay all of these guys everything that they deserve. They all deserve a lot. And I've only got so much money, right? And that's kind of where we're at. It's the theme of the day as we come to you both from our hotel rooms here in Indianapolis on a day where Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor spoke with the media here at the Combine, both for about 30 minutes at the podium almost, and then another half hour apiece on the side just with our local reporting contingent. So there's a lot more that was said than what you maybe have seen out there on the podium sessions that kind of made their way out to everybody. Maybe some of what's gone on, but there's a lot, like a ton of ground was covered with Duke, specifically new ground, and with Zach. We talked about scouting, the size of the scouting staff, about this defensive line draft, rebuilding it. Thoughts on some of the issues that they've had with Jermaine Burton. If there was a topic you can think of, it was touched today by Duke Tobin, by Zach Taylor. We want to keep this focused on the big kahunas, though, because that is the news of the day. It is how the Bengals are approaching what the latest round of conversation is about Tee Higgins, about Jamar Chase, about Trey Hendrickson, and about their thoughts on Joe Burrow's thoughts on Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson, because the circus kind of rolls on. I'll just throw it open to you here to kick it off, Charlie. In regards to those three, what stood out to you most from what we heard from Duke and from Zach today?
Yeah, what I'm going to remember, 5 years from now from all of this was that Duke Tobin had the same kind of look in his eye, the same kind of smirk that Joe Burrow had on that night in Dallas. There was a confidence, there was a assuredness of a plan, and we know we can get this done under the cap. Now, with that, and I think this is my big takeaway, this is what I wrote today, this is the story. With that, Burrow-esque swagger, I don't know that we've ever said that about Duke Tobin before, no disrespect to Duke, but who has it? With that Burrow-esque swagger comes expectations. The Bengals today left themselves without a safety net. They have a plan, get these deals done. They have the room to get these done. They feel good about the progress they've made to get these done. They want to make their quarterback happy because they want the exact same things. And the vibe I get, and what we're all saying is, I think we all feel better about that happening. It also creates some pressure to get that done quickly, get that done in a way that, as Duke said, gives them some added flexibility heading into free agency. They've now got a hit on this. They said what to expect, and an offseason full of pressure. To me, all today did was add to the pressure that's facing front office and ownership.
That's a great point. The theme of it all, really, from Duke, I would say, from Higgins and Chase specifically, I'm going to bucket them differently than Hendrickson today. I thought that the tone was a little bit different around those two groups. It's not Tee Higgins is getting done, is what it sounded like. When you listen, there was no hiding from it. There was no couching the comments. That last year was this like very vague nature of what's going on there, keeping their options open. There is no sense of that. It was we can get T done. We want to get T done. I want T here. I've been trying to get T done for 3 years, year after year after year. I've been trying to get Tee Higgins done, and I want Tee Higgins on my team. Wherever I am in charge of a team, I want Tee Higgins on it, is Duke Tobin's statement. You can't be more effusive in praise of what they're trying to do. But I thought also he had a quote that he said, "I think we have our arms around it," was one thing that he said to us in the second side session, essentially talking about the framework of what it looks like, of what T wants. It's just a matter of getting it there. And he basically put it on them at that point. And if they maybe have different ideas about what we feel like we all have our arms around here. And so it has to get to the end. Jamar Chase, as definitive as ever today. It was, he will be the highest paid non-quarterback in football. Zach Taylor said it. Duke Tobin said it. Really, again, because he said it before. They are not running from that. He's our top priority. We have the space. I don't think that's really a surprise. It's almost kind of a, yeah, of course, that's what it doesn't sound like it ends contentious. That doesn't mean, again, that it doesn't. Because like you said, Charlie, you can have a plan. You can say these things. But now you got to get it done. To me, everyone that was there, they're like, everyone's crowded around Duke Tobin's thing. Everyone wants to ask the question. And it was asked about 18 different ways to Duke, who kept trying to find new ways to answer. And I'm going to guess was pretty frustrated by that. But, everybody had a different version of the same questions. Can you pull this off? Can you pull this off? And at the end of the day, I think we still have the same question. They have a good plan too, but can you pull this off? And to me, that's kind of the theme is where we sit now.
That was the quote. I don't have it in front of me, but basically it was Zach. It was like, it'll all be really hard. There are all a lot of moving pieces, but this is what we spend every waking hour of our offseason lives working toward. And it's interesting too. Something I've been thinking a lot about was at this point last year, I think what we all were confident the plan was, all right, one more year with T. Then of course they'd keep Jamar. And then right now we'd be talking about extensions with Dax Hill, with Cam Taylor-Britt. We'd be talking about Jermaine Burton ascending into a role. You had the Higgins replacement plan. Not that was somewhat of a plan. They had all that underway, and then all that backfired to the fullest degree. They end up right back here, and all that does, I'll keep stressing, is add more pressure on plan A, because plan B is, hoping that Cam and Dax click so you can pay them next year. Some big praise for Dax today, but still coming off the torn ACL. Wide receiver would be a massive question without T. Looking at the season that Burton had last year, and it kind of circles all the way back to where the Bengals, were in 2022. And what did Mike Brown say? The train's coming. And basically, sorry, Jesse, we've got our quarterback and we've got our two receivers. And it felt today like a full circle moment. The Bengals getting all the way back around to, this is who we are. This is the identity. This is what we have that no one else has. And they'll keep the best players. And as Duke said, I think they're willing to, I think he used the words, all the money somewhere in there. So definitely a willingness to spend, but negotiation savvy that it will now take to get this across the finish line.
And I think another part of his message here was, we want to get these done. We feel like we can with all of these guys and more. We do not look at this as we're just going to re-sign those guys and run it back with everybody else without investing elsewhere. It very much said there's going to be an investment in this defense that needs to come too. And that's where I thought was another really interesting part of this that was maybe a little bit of a new data point, was the emphasis on getting Chase and Higgins done early, and really emphasizing that in a big way of like, look, he said, quote, I think we have the ability to build the defense if we can get, he was talking about, can you do the defense with the contracts? I think we have the ability to build the defense if we can get clarity on the contract and structure in a way that is beneficial. If they linger, it creates a little bit of uncertainty. That stood out to me. That is, it's going to be extra hard for us to do all of these things, put this massive puzzle together, if we don't have what we need to have around the edge first. I think I've talked about being a puzzle guy before on this podcast. To me, like, it's Higgins and Chase are putting all of the edges of the piece of the puzzle together. You can't really do it right if you aren't able to have that in place. You can't do the whole picture. You can't do the whole defense. You can't do everything you want to do if you don't have that stuff settled. I thought the urgency of getting that done sooner, which is something we've talked a lot about to avoid so much of the distractions and troubles that became a huge part of last year and the storyline and hung over this team through the offseason and camp, to eliminate that, specifically because it's really hard to do the defense and know your plan going forward if it's wide receiver a need, like all of these other things, if you don't have that, and it very much an admittance of that, I thought today, of like the importance and them talking about, look, we're working them in parallel paths right now. We're working them at the same time. One could get done before the other. We're kind of working them together, which is helpful when it's with the same agent. I think they're kind of like all Rocky's on speed dial at this point, right? It sounds like that's fully where it's at, but the urgency noted to me today, Charlie. Did you hear it that same way?
Yeah, this is an organization that's known for getting contract extensions done on the tarmac and as the Thursday night season opener kicks off. And for the first time, that I can remember, there are real things at stake for getting this done with some urgency. I was a part of Howie Roseman's press conference today. And I said, what advantages did it give you guys when you got these deals done early? And he said, an extra player. And for a Bengals defense that, as Duke said, had that, or for a Bengals team that, as Duke stressed, still has these many areas to improve, it's very, 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 very clear from Duke's comment and Zach's comments. I mean, they know this defensive line needs a significant investment, even though there's some belief in the young guys they have. All of this timing stuff, to me, that gives leverage for Jamar and Tee. And of course, what is 3 years of leverage anyway? But Duke's one piece of leverage from what he was selling, his one selling point that he was stressing for work with us was as we negotiate with you, what you get, we're taking away from the other 49, and we still want to build a winning team around you. Like that line, I wrote that down in my notebook right away. That was basically Duke's concession. Like, we do need your help because the ball's in your court. You're going to get great money. We would like to pay you. We also need a bit of help. They say even though they do have the flexibility for the entire roster with the cap space that they have, and they will create more before the start of the season, and they will create more cap space by getting these deals done early. But that comment from Duke was a reminder that, the Bengals need to get these done as quickly as possible, and Jamar and Tee are sitting pretty, knowing what's coming. And, good for them. As Duke and Zach said a million times, they've earned it. And, now for the Bengals' sake, they better get this done, or at least one of these done before the start of free agency.
Yeah, the other part of this was, a lot of intrigue in how the Burrow comments landed. And they had I think they clearly had their talking points set on what they wanted to say on that. I just want to read you what Zach Taylor had to say about that in his side session with us. He said, it's outstanding to have a player who's going to support his teammates and wants the most for them. These guys have developed such a tight bond that you're just striving for with every team you've been a part of, that you have this type of chemistry amongst those guys that they would want to see each other rewarded. All these guys we're talking about work their tails off. They're some of the hardest workers we have on the team. There's not a player in the locker room that would tell you differently. So these guys have put themselves in a position to be rewarded, and they've got a quarterback that supports that. He's shown privately and publicly he's got their back. Joe and myself and Duke and our front office are very much in line with what we want out of this organization and our future. And Joe and I have had tons of conversations. We're always on the same page. I don't have any issues with what he has done whatsoever and said publicly. I would always take that over what else could happen. And so I'm happy that we've got Joe. I'm happy he fights for his guys. I'm happy they're able to see that. And of course, we're all working behind the scenes to make sure that we can have our best team moving forward and all these guys on the roster. I like that approach. I like that reaction. Now, maybe it was like, how can we spin this spin zone? But it's something I've been saying about this the whole time. Like, it's Joe fighting for his guys. Like, he just wants to keep his guys. He wants to see them all get paid. He's learned a little bit about the power that he has, and he's using it. And I think it's business. It's like the same thing that Duke Tobin's up here saying, like, we don't get mad about this stuff. It's business. And there was no animosity, no ill will. And Duke Tobin said, I agree with everything that guy said. I want all those players too. And so I felt like the reaction to what was could be viewed as obviously very public pressure on the front office made a lot of sense, and it hit right for me.
So kind of before the Bengals stuff today, because their guys spoke later in the day, my story I was working on was how quarterbacks have kind of become assistant GMs. So I asked around, Bills, Jaguars, Buccaneers, lesser extent, Ravens. I made more around Eagles, and my questions were along the line of what added value and advantage does it give you when you have a quarterback who speaks his mind? Do you empower them to speak your mind? And what does that do? And kind of my favorite answer was Brandon Beane, the Bills GM, saying, Josh Allen is better at my job than I am. Josh Allen has a vision of football better than I have. Josh Allen understands the way players work together. He understands the locker room better than I do. You had Eric DeCosta, the Ravens, saying that, actually, that reminds me, I've been meaning to get to Miami to meet with Lamar Jackson, and because I need his take on free agency. And like, this is what the great teams are doing. And the Bengals, and you give them credit, and this isn't a new trend. I forget who said it was like, Brett Favre was asking for Randy Moss in 2003, but the Bengals' whole philosophy was from right away building everything and empowering your quarterback and having everything in your organization touch that. And when you see that payoff is now, because Burrow is that invested, Burrow is that involved in decision-making. None of that's new. He's very comfortable in the role that he's in. Last thing here, like it reminded me of, and I mentioned this to Zach, one of Zach's philosophies is he likes having plays on the play sheets that quarterbacks believe will work. And in some cases that quarterbacks vote on the top of the sheet, because he says quarterbacks will do the extra 5% that they didn't know they had in them to make themselves right, to make the play work. Because when they're in it, they're going to make it work because they've got something on the line. And Burrow has something on the line here. And when you follow Burrow's plan, and it's not just Burrow's plan, but when you follow Burrow's plan, Burrow is that much more eager, willing, excited, involved in making that work, from something as bold as a restructure to even just making a phone call and recruiting and stuff that's simple like that. So all of this adds together, and we're at this moment where it's all about to either explode or ideally for the Bengals come together.
Yeah, Duke Tobin pointing out no need for a restructure from Joe Burrow at this point because Katie Blackburn has put them in such good cap position. He even had a little side rant about, look, dead money is, we don't want to have dead money. We want to have the money being paid to as much as we can to all of the players that we have in our actual building every year. Made sure to get his dead money taken there. But pointing out that and that's something we've been saying. This has not been about cap space this entire time. Anybody that has done the mock off season exercise recognizes that it's not hard to get these things done and under the cap. They're in plenty of good position to do that. It's about a lot of the other dynamics of how it all plays out. And we're not going to get into that here. We're going to focus on the new stuff for today, but just him pointing out that restructure is not a thing that they have any discussions or need for at this point was just a little note there. Let's talk about Hendrickson. Okay. Trey's tone was different. And now, but it wasn't dismissive, but it was, we'll get to that one. It felt like they want to get Trey done. They like him, they like the idea of giving him more money and extending him, and they feel good about that possibility. But it was a very much if that's something we can get in and be in agreement to, and he is under contract. Like, it felt like that was sort of the asterisk every time the praise would be heaped on Trey was, well, we've got to find an agreement on what that number is, and he's under contract right now. So it was like, yeah, I think he even said it specifically like that. I'm trying to find it here in my story. We'll get to that as the offseason goes. He said, we're going to talk as the offseason goes and hopefully come up to an agreement that's acceptable of, are we there yet? We're not there yet. It says you're not at the top of our priority list right now. We're going to do free agency. We're going to do Higgins and Chase, and let's see what's left over for Trey. and what that all means. That's how I took all of that.
What I loved today was Zach said it, Duke said it. They were always like, our doors are open, and if any players would like to talk to us about anything that's on your mind, the phone works both ways, and that was definitely a point. Something related with Trey, and of course now the subtext here is, would they be willing to have him play out the season on that last year of his deal, which of course Trey couldn't do anything about. You asked Zach the distraction that Jamar and how that impacted the season, and is that connected to the slow start? And Zach was basically like, well, I could say that if we the Bengals hadn't also started slow in each of the previous 3 seasons. But they have a slow start every year, and it's contract angst isn't necessarily a dependent variable here. They've had slow starts with contract angst, and they've had slow starts without contract angst. The sense I got with that was that's something that, what did Zach say too? He went on about this, that if you're good, this is life. People will be upset about their contracts. Not everyone can get paid. People will not be happy at camp. People might not practice in camp. Can't be much worse than it was with Jamar last year. He didn't use the word worse, but, of course, Jamar went up until the end, and I learned from that. Zach said, basically saying that I'm sure it'll happen sometime again because, as Zach said, you got good players, and maybe Trey is next up in that. We both discussed at length the pitfalls of extending Trey Hendrickson, and I think we both planted our flags there. But, of course, the idea of the Burrow plan is probably the best case in extending Trey. It would be more of an all-in move, but then also on the side, like the subplot of the day was get these extensions done, ... and rebuild the young defense that grows together. And a lot of praise for a lot of these young guys, even guys Zach said weren't getting an opportunity. So that's what's going on defense, and these things are both connected. And Trey's the one guy that's kind of stuck on his own little island that they'll have to figure out what they're going to do.
2 things about the Trey conversation that were sort of new from Duke today. In the side session that we did with him, I was kind of asking, we were asking about the age factor and how they view the age factor, the diminishing returns that you tend to see when you get to this point from edge rushers, almost no matter what metric you're talking about, as basic as sacks to as deep as pass rush win rate and things that we've seen. It's notable. He called it a data point. He said, it's just a data point, and we're trying to get a deal done with Trey. So that would tell you what our conclusion is on it. We are trying actively to get a deal done with Trey. It's just a matter of coming to an agreement on what that looks like and fits. But he talked about that as a data point. Lots of players have different data points, whether it's production, whether it's age, whether it's injury history, whether it's a lot of these things that are all part of the data points with T as well. The 54% of snaps played over the last 2 years is a data point with Tee Higgins, and I'm sure it's part of it. And the same thing with Trey. His age is going to be a part of it. But him saying, if you want to know how we feel about that, look at the fact that we're still trying to get this done, even though he's at the age of it as he is. I asked specifically about trading Trey Hendrickson if they can't find that type of agreement, and it does get to that point. He said, quote, our preference with Trey is to have him on our football team because we want him. I never really talk about open preferences for trading guys because all that does is take on a life of its own. And it's not something I want to do because I want Trey on our football team. He's under contract. We're looking to pay him for what we believe will be really good future years, and we see him as not falling off in his career. That's why we're actively trying. And if we get to the point where we're actively trying to trade him, maybe I'll give you a call. A little offended by Duke saying maybe there, honestly. Like, just call me, man. Like, I need that. Like, I'm here for that. If you're going to trade him, please call me. No, maybe. Don't call me maybe here, Carly Rae Jepsen. Let's do it, Duke. Give me the call. And so you didn't think you were going to get that drop, did you, Charlie?
That wasn't a good reference, Paul.
No, look, I got little girls. Okay. I've sung that song at bedtime before. All right. So the bottom line though, I think on it is look, there was a, I don't like talking about that in there. Okay. And there wasn't a, no, I'm not, it wasn't go get your own edge rusher. Like we heard a couple of years ago from Duke in regards to go get your own receiver and Tee Higgins. And I think that kind of speaks to it a little bit. Again, it's a lot of positive things here, a lot of love to do it, but there's also a lot of we'll get to that and see where we're at. And so I thought the priorities were pretty clearly set, and you can see how that's going to kind of be maybe the last one hanging out there as they reach the summer, or at least under this plan that they're trying to pull off.
Trey, when we had the conversation, Trey's great season. Trey Hendrickson, what a Pro Bowl, what an all-pro type player. One of the cases against keeping Trey Hendrickson is something I believe in, which is the power of having Al Golden build a defense that can grow and improve together, and maybe even one day be right there, maybe not all the way even with your offense, but have it growing to something that maybe is good enough to be a unit that shoulders a lot of responsibility in a Super Bowl caliber core, building that over time. Obviously, Trey is not in that next 4 years building vision. Duke started today with an opening statement. Duke's opening statement today was championship expectations, failure in 2024. He didn't use the word embarrassment, but like embarrassment of the way they lost games, the need to turn things around immediately. I think he used the word irritated at one point. This isn't a team that I think is going to completely hit the reset button on its defense because they want to completely start over. So again, Trey's kind of stuck in the middle, like with as all in as Bengals would go all in approach. Like I could see the Bengals having Trey just play out this year on a contract year. He wouldn't be happy about it. I could see that happening. That would be in line with the all in message Duke had. Like you said just now, like we've talked about, value in a long-term vision of a defense that can genuinely and organically grow together. You add on Zach Taylor's comments, which was the value of kind of like you've termed it, clearing the decks for younger leaders to emerge. And you had the Sam Hubbard example notably step up where, Dunlap out of the room, Hubbard emerges. Of course, Hendrickson's the old guy in the room now. All of this, I don't feel a resolution, but I feel, I don't know. Yeah, what am I trying to say here? I don't feel a resolution. I could see you parsing the tea leaves and going either way. It'll probably come down to what Trey would be willing to accept. It would come down to what a trade offer would be. I'm in the keep T camp before I get to that level of details. With Trey, I do think the truth is in the middle, which is in the level of details about what Trey would accept and then what other teams would offer in a trade.
Yeah. I've thought since the very beginning, it's the most fascinating piece of this whole thing because it has the most variance in where it could end. And I feel even more strongly about that after everything that we heard from these guys today. Before we wrap this up, because you know what I have to make it to dinner and I need a drink after this day. But I will say this, let's go with one non big kahunas topic. That's something that you took away from today.
Kind of out of left field, I'll leave a more obvious one to you. Some Jordan Battle love from Zach Taylor. That was notable. I feel stronger about Jordan Battle being a starting safety on the 2025 Bengals.
Yeah, no, I heard that from multiple. That's like, I feel like we've heard that from a bunch of different people, that everyone came away feeling great about Jordan Battle. Haven't gotten anybody to stand on the same Geno Stone table yet. Still don't have the answer on that, but Al Golden and a bunch of coaches on deck for our conversations that we're going to have tomorrow here at the Combine, so we can dig a little bit more into that. I asked Duke Tobin about his small scouting staff, and if specifically talking about Trey Brown going on these interviews and if there's a plan in place, if he would have gotten one of those, and just sort of all of his guys, and that spawned into my question being like, look, I know how you feel about a small scouting staff. I know how you view all of that. But as the league changes and gets bigger and your coaching staff is bigger and everything that the NFL is doing is bigger and more vast and needing more, are you open to adding to that room? And I'll just read you his answer. I thought it was a really interesting answer. He said, if I thought we were missing something, I would definitely add more. Adding more just to satisfy a league quota isn't something I would do. If I thought we were missing some area and weren't getting coverage where I need or where I wanted, or we needed a capacity we don't currently have, then certainly I would look at it. Right now, I think the group is operating very effectively and cohesively. I value their opinions. I know what I'm getting out of their opinions. When you add new people, it takes a while to know what you're getting out of those opinions. So those opinions don't hold the weight until they've been here for a while. There are people around the league I know, I like and trust, and I'm prepared if something happens. Yeah, I'm always prepared if something happens. But the need right now isn't there. If it pops up tomorrow that we need X and don't have the coverage for it, and I need somebody with a different skill set, we will go out and get them. I thought that was interesting as a double down on his philosophy and pointing out that I don't know if I bring somebody new in that I can trust them, and I need to trust everything that I'm hearing around me right now. So no budging on the size of staff, no movement there. And for people that love to point that out and talk about it, we want to make sure you know that we're asking these questions for you guys. And I've heard versions of this rant from Duke Tobin pretty much maybe since my first year, probably here. Maybe the first time I ever interviewed him. I think I heard this whole spiel before. But I think, you're hearing it more where he just he always believes in trusting what he's hearing and bringing in somebody new at this juncture and feeling like he doesn't know if he can trust it. Feels like he's just keeping his circle tight, man. I think that's just kind of the way it is. He feels like he has all the information. That's not the issue. And it would help if he had a good draft to back it up. There's no question about that.
This is like an hour-long podcast for another day, but my philosophy on the scouting staff conversation is that on a whole, it's overblown, but my reaction to it is the same reaction I had when the Bengals were buyers at the deadline for the first time in history and traded a 7th-round pick for Khalil Herbert. My response to that was that hard? Like, did it take 50 years before could they add one more? Like, would one more specifically in a almost developmental role in the front office? Maybe not even just a developmental role. I think, what did Callie do? Brian Callahan just added another analytics, game management, that side expertise that feeds into scouting and such as well. Of course, Sam Francis does a great job, or, who knows? But it sounds like Sam Francis does a great job.
Yeah.
I like the idea of continuing to develop that side, but that brings me back to the sub story of the day we were talking about earlier. The 7th guy in the front office right now is Al Golden. And, you have Duke saying, he recruited these guys and he played against these guys at multiple places. And a million times he talked about, collaboration, alignment, all of that vision shared with Al, and him stepping right into a leadership role, continuing to make Al Golden one of the most important figures in this offseason for a defense that desperately needs to improve while being on a budget, but does have premium draft picks they can use at that position. It all comes back, can they get this defense to average? Every conversation, Higgins, Hendrickson, Golden, the size of the front office, it all comes back to, can they get this defense back to average? And here they are again.
Maybe they should change up his title and it's be defensive coordinator / lead defensive scout. You know what I mean? Like, just go ahead and put it on there, because they're clearly leaning on him for that right now, for all the exposure he's had to everybody in college and a knowledge of what those guys should look like and who they are. Still going to keep banging Xavier Watson round 2 after hearing all that stuff today. I can tell you that much. So that's on the table. All right, Charlie. Appreciate it, brother. Make sure everybody's reading the chalkboard. I know you've already got something up now. I have a story kind of going a lot deeper in a lot of the stuff that we talked to about the big 3 today up on The Athletic. Make sure you're reading both of those in both spots. And we'll be back more once the whole combine concludes. We're going to have a bunch more stuff for you on Who Dey Light later here this week. We're here news gathering and reporting at this point, so we can bring you all the inside stuff that we'll have. Make sure you keep it locked to all of those spots. All right. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you later.
Yep.